Upon the expiration of the Millennium Development Goals, the United Nations in 2015 adopted the Sustainable Development Goals with a target to meet them by the year 2030. 5 years down the line, 17 goals in all targeted at attaining peace and prosperity while combating climate change. But do you know what indicators are saying about your country, Nigeria? We'll be finding that out in the course of this program. My name is Leah, and as always, it's nice to have you join me on the show. We'll begin straight away from the trends table. The Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, has issued new guidelines directing bureau de change operators to purchase foreign exchange from a single authorized dealer per week. The Apex Bank also directed the BDCs to comply with Know Your Customer measures. CBN, in a circular signed by the Acting Director of Trade and Exchange Department, Williams James Kenya, mandated a weekly purchase cap of $25,000 per BDC from authorized dealers and permitted forex cash purchased by BDCs from authorized dealer banks to be sold to end users at a rate not exceeding 1% margin above the buying rate. The National Insurance Commission (NICAM) has received a delegation from the World Bank, led by Mr. Minaz Safavian, to explore opportunities for collaboration and growth in Nigeria's insurance sector. Mr. Minaz promised to consider NICAM's request for assistance, including capacity building, automation, and capital market development. Commissioner for Insurance, Mr. Olusegun Ayo Mosheyin, had highlighted the National Insurance Commission's dual role in regulating the insurance industry and driving growth and development in Nigeria. He expressed NICAM's commitment to support President Bola Tinubu's vision of a $1 trillion economy. The Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission (ICPC) says it recovered 20 billion naira paid to ghost workers as pensions in 2024. Musa Aliu, chairman of the commission, who disclosed these in Abuja, said they discovered that an individual put his wife, son and in-laws on the payroll, adding that by being proactive has enabled the anti-graft agency to stem corruption in the country. He said the commission in 2024 also identified people inserting ghost workers into the system. United States President Donald Trump has signed an executive order that will withdraw United States from the United Nations UN Human Rights Council. The order would also withdraw the U.S. from the UN's Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA. Signing the order, Trump also instructed a review of America's involvement in UNESCO, insisting that the UN needs to be fair to countries that deserve fairness. Meanwhile, the United Nations has warned that a pullout could have a catastrophic impact as the U.S. funded 47% of humanitarian aid in 2024. The American government has ordered nearly all directly hired staff of the U.S. Agency for International Development (USAID) to be placed on leave, apart from designated personnel responsible for mission-critical functions, core leadership, and specially designated programs. USAID, in a statement on its website, said personnel posted overseas will be recalled from their postings within 30 days. The aid agency said it would consider case-by-case exceptions and extensions based on personal or family hardship, mobility or safety concerns, or other reasons. Here's that policy conversation on the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. It's 5 years left for Nigeria and indeed the rest of the world to meet up with the ambitious targets of the Sustainable Development Goals, that is the SDGs. These goals consist of 17 global goals that serve as a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future by all in the year 2030. Enene Ejembi is the founder and executive director of Verbatim Virtual Solutions, a leading strategic communications consulting firm. She has over 20 years' experience in leading the implementation of international development projects. Her expertise is in governance, economic growth, health, and education. It's nice to have you join me for this conversation.
Thank you very much, Leah. It's good to be here.
Thank you. We have just 5 years to go to meet up with these ambitious targets. And for a lot of Nigerians, the concern will be, where are we?
And we can look at that in terms of where we are globally and where we are in Nigeria as a country. Like you said, it's 5 years to the completion of that duration. We're in the decade of action. And in the last few years, there have been a lot of rallies and calls for acceleration on achievement of the SDGs. The pandemic might have played a part in it, but progress is alarmingly slow. Globally, only 17% of the targets and indicators are on track. That is dismal. In Nigeria, there's been rankings that have been done in terms of where different countries are in terms of progress. And Nigeria is 146 out of 166 countries. So clearly, there is a lot of work to be done in terms of meeting those goals. We have shown good progress in some areas, while others, perhaps there's been a lot of work, a lot of effort put in, but maybe we're not seeing the measurable progress that we expect to see at this stage. So, for example, both globally and in Nigeria, SDG 9 is showing remarkable progress. So in terms of looking at industry and innovation. And if you think about it, part of that is infrastructure. We're in the tech era, and Nigeria is on board with that. So a lot of the progress in those areas is where we have done well in terms of technology development, as well as infrastructural development. But you see those ones that have more to do with human behavior and core public sector delivery, the progress is slow. And so for people like me who work in that space, we're looking at what can be done, what needs to change, what do we need to accelerate for us to see ourselves not at 17% performance, but closer to 100% come 2030.
Perhaps we look at some of those goals. Goal number 1 is the one that touches everyone, that is on poverty. Poverty. Yes. What is your assessment on Nigeria's performance?
Well, we have had monikers thrown at us in terms of how much poverty there is in Nigeria. There are regional disparities in Nigeria. We're all aware of that. And there's been a lot of effort. However, we are in the period where we have seen a lot of reversals of progress that was made, say, a decade ago, where our GDP growth was significantly higher than the average in many countries. Nigeria did very well in terms of productivity. Earlier, around 2008, 2010, 2011, we had a recession, 2016, and the effects of the pandemic also hit us, not purely from a public health perspective, but also from an economic perspective. Some of the work that I do is actually focused on cushioning those effects of the poverty. And a lot of it has to do with two things. One, the reduced activity during the pandemic reduced our productivity, and low productivity means more poverty. But also, globally, we're in a place where the means of production are changing, and Nigeria has depended on its oil revenue for way too long. We've been talking about diversifying the economy for decades now. How much has really been done to diversify that economy? How many sectors that were productive have been abandoned in those years? So sectors like agriculture, sectors like manufacturing. We need to revive those sectors, and I think that's the focus of this administration. And a lot of the work that we are doing in this time, at least my work at Verbatim, is working on looking at how we can provide economic stimulus through some World Bank projects, but also looking at how we can ramp up the capacity of people to function within those industries. Nigerians have gotten to the point where we don't even associate wealth with productive activity. because of the dividends of being an oil-producing country. A lot of us do not understand that, for example, the forex issues that we have with the naira being so poor performing against the dollar has a lot to do with our lack of productivity. So I think that there's hope, but a lot of it has less to do with technical solutions and more around mindset change, values change, and doing things better. Does the government have a role to play? Absolutely. We need the right policies in place. We need those policies to be connected to a long-term development plan. We need those plans to stay stable. Well, while we have medium-term plans that are kind of stable, the implementation of them, sometimes you can see that there's a disconnect between what's in the plan and then what the MDAs are doing. So more coherence between what the MDAs execute, the projects that they execute, and the policies and the plans that are in place. If those things are done very well, then there'll be better public services, there'll be a better business environment for a lot of the young people who are willing to go into different kinds of entrepreneurship. We'll have our industries become bigger. You know, one of the most shocking data that you can look at in countries like Nigeria, not just Nigeria, a lot of developing countries, middle-income countries, is the size of firms. So yes, while we say it's great that we're enterprising and we have a lot of entrepreneurs, the shocks that can easily just wipe out those businesses is minimal. If you have bigger firms, then people have more sustainable means of engagement and employment, and productivity continues over a long term. And we have platforms in Nigeria for those dialogues and engagements to continue to happen. We have the Nigeria Economic Summit Group that does really good work in terms of the private sector letting the government know and advocating for the things that will help them grow. There's a lot that needs to happen around the way that we think, mindset, values, so that our development is sustainable.
Goal 3, that is the goal on health and well-being. You've spoken about it and the pandemic, and I'm hoping you're going to throw more light. Did the pandemic in any way affect that goal, and to what extent?
Just as we would see with many of the massive public health issues that have hit West Africa and Nigeria over the years, there's a way that, I don't know what it is about Nigerians and dealing with emergencies, but we tend to do well there. Personally, I traveled during the pandemic, and I can tell you for free that Nigeria's response to COVID cannot be compared to that of many other countries, including Western countries. I was in the US in October 2020. Traveling out of Nnamdi Azikiwe Airport was very structured. There was a lot of documentation, evidence you needed to show there was social distancing. They were tracking to make sure you were not a risk based on locations and countries you had been to. I was expecting the same when I arrived the Philadelphia airport in the US, and it absolutely was, and there was no social distancing. There was no question asked about my COVID status, whether I had been tested or not. Nobody asked me which countries I had visited. There was nothing to show that they were tracking and managing accordingly. In terms of, the World Health Organization and what they've said about the way the pandemic was managed, I think that Nigeria deserves some commendation for how that was done, and the NCDC in particular. However, yes, it did bring to light some of our fault lines, which is access to good health, right? How many people actually have health insurance in Nigeria? And I think that there have been reforms in that area. For Nigeria, it was more of the economic impacts. And again, also just seeing how, it showed to us that the global economy has changed, and we can no longer rely on our oil revenue to run this country anymore. We need to make sure that we have other productive sectors of the economy, and that those sectors have government backing. People can work in a systemic fashion, not just individual entrepreneurs in some pockets everywhere. And that we need to leverage our own funding for that. A lot of times when people ask me where I work, I say I'm a shadow government, because all of us in international development do what some ministry, department, or agency is mandated to do. And yes, for the most part, we do that in collaboration with them. However, there is an organization, there's a professionalism, there's an urgency, there's a culture of measuring results. There's a culture of reporting results. I think that's another thing that government does poorly. So even when government does well, we don't toot our horns. We do not allow citizens know that these successes exist. So I think that the work that we do is significant. If you look at how small the overseas development assistance is, Nigeria is not an aid-dependent country. We have a lot more available through budgetary sources, right? So if we use those budgetary sources more efficiently, then we would have more development to show for the work that's been done. And I think it's important for us in this industry to look at that, to come in and work more directly with government on these initiatives and not rely on the donor-funded work, because as we know, if we look to the United States these days, that is shrinking, and it's not only the US.
How is the space where people like you operate gearing up, or would I say looking out for other solutions when we see that particularly the funds are being questioned? Are you worried about issues of transparency and execution of these funds? Is it a concern to people like you?
Making sure that the funds are used for the things that they were planned for is very important. But it is less a worry than the fact that in the overseas development space, those funds are no longer guaranteed. And I think it's fair enough. I don't think that those funds should continue to be guaranteed into perpetuity, right? I mean, just logically speaking, if you're supporting an entity to get to the point where they are fully developed, there must be an end date. There must be, as they say, a journey to self-reliance. There must be a point where those funds are not needed, that technical assistance is not needed. I would say since the return to democracy, that's when we had a lot more support in terms of overseas development assistance in Nigeria. So from 1999 to date is more than 25 years. And people like me are evidence of the Nigerian citizens who have worked in those spaces, gained that knowledge, gained that expertise, gained that skill set, gained those networks. And not only understood the technical means to bring development in different sectors and using different areas of expertise and disciplines, but also understanding and feeling in our hearts the need for it as citizens, right? I'll tell you one of the reasons why I established my own consulting firm. I was working on a program funded by the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. It was an economic growth program. And there were many times when I would work with my employers who were based in the United Kingdom. And, I would come up with solutions, or team members, not just myself, would come up with solutions that could be executed, and the budget was minimal. Not something that you needed to worry about. And the response would be, no, we're not going to do it. We would be able to, articulate what benefit it would make to citizens if we were able to do it. And the response would be, the client, FCDO, did not ask us to do that, and so we're not going to use man hours to execute that. As a Nigerian, that did not make any sense to me. We are here doing development work. We are already executing XYZ. If we put in this much effort and time with very little funds, we would be able to serve, hundreds more Nigerians. For me, that's a good deal as a Nigerian. And so one day I sat down and I thought about it, and I'm saying, Enene, you feel this way because you are a Nigerian, because you are not thinking about the purely commercial side of things. So what they are doing is not wrong. It's fine considering that they are not Nigerians. And so people like you who are patriotic, who care about your country beyond the commercial benefits, you guys need to come into this space. you need to employ other Nigerians and you need to execute these programs. And so that was why I established my consulting firm. And so the work that I do, the work that my team does, we do it first and foremost as part of patriotism.
You've also walked around the goal number 5, which has to do with gender equality, and we are just 1 month away to, of course, that period where the whole world comes to say, oh, equal rights and this and that for women. But particularly, what kind of conversation are you having with the subnationals and community leaders?
It's a great one. I love talking about gender equality. I love talking about the issues that have to do with groups amongst us who are marginalized, who are taught not to hold on to power, who are taught that their lot is to be accepted. When we talk about gender inequality in Nigeria, we talk a lot about, women and girls. And if you think about it, a lot of the work that needs to be done in terms of making people understand the culture, So a lot of times when you work with development partners on gender equality, they may understand the end vision, but they may not understand the path that we need to get there. So a lot of the work that we do takes into cognizance religious scripting and how people see things and is valid, cultural practices and how some people will kick back against certain things just because it just doesn't sound right. They may even agree with you on the end goal, You'll be hard-pressed to find any Nigerian who does not value their mother, who does not revere their mother. And yet, on the other hand, you wonder if they see things in terms of we want to, especially when you use a word like feminism, a lot of people are going to kick back the moment you say that word. It's a word I try to stay away from. And instead, let us look at how do we want to make sure women are economically empowered. I don't think anybody argues with that. How do you want to make sure that women have a voice in society? So the social equality. How do we get more women to be interested in leadership at all levels? So I'm talking from a girl being a prefect in a secondary school to a woman being a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, to a woman, going through the political process to be elected into a House of Assembly, for example. How do we get women and girls to be more interested in those things? Why do we want to do that? Because women are at least 50% of the population. And a nation that wants to develop cannot say that the capacities, experiences, knowledge, wisdom, ability of 50% of its population is not useful in that journey to development.
Where is Nigeria in the whole scheme of partnership? Can Nigeria or any country at all achieve these goals without partnership?
So you bring to mind SDG 17, that looks at the partnerships to achieve the goals. And no, the answer is no. And I think that is why it was included in the SDGs, as opposed to the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, because a lot of things do not happen without collaborative action, long-term collaborative action. Long-term collaborative action works best where you have a good rule of law, where you can enforce contracts, where you can get justice. So that's SDG 16. So they both kind of speak to each other. In terms of the work that Nigeria is doing, there's a lot being done in terms of partnerships, and all of that is mostly anchored through the President's Senior Special Assistant on the SDGs, Princess Adefulure. And through her office, she's working with government on the one hand, working with donors and development partners on the other hand, working with citizen groups, as well as working with the organized private sector. So we fall, firms like Verbatim Solution falls under the organized private sector and kind of like development partner area. And there's a lot that's being done. I think those mechanisms could be strengthened so that they work better together. But I think that in terms of having those systems in place, Nigeria is doing a very good job.
Yeah, and that was going to make my next question, how Nigeria can make the best out of the next 5 years.
5 years. I think we need to deal with the SDGs 1 through 5. They're the ones lagging the most, even globally. And I think that we need to be more strategic, and action needs to be a lot more urgent in terms of how we deal with those things. So I think it's a balance of doing the things that require significant budgetary investment on the one hand, but are also systemic, that will unlock gains in different areas, as well as looking at things that will give us quick wins. So in terms of service delivery around health, service delivery around education, what are the areas where we can see quick movement, identify them and execute them. It will take partnerships between many ministries, departments and agencies. It will take partnerships with a lot of the development partners, and it will take an ownership way of looking at things where government is in the driver's seat, owning all of that. I think that one of the things that I feel is that a lot of the work that we do as development partners, I don't know if there's enough coordination between them. So you have a program, it's an economic growth program. You have a program, it's a climate program. But climate and economic growth are not disparate, right? You have a program, it's an agriculture program. So we need to see more of the linkages and the coordination between them so that we can scale impact and deliver towards those goals. We need to recognize merit a lot more in issuing contracts, in executing jobs, in delivering work, so that while the resources have been appropriated, we will see the results that follow.
Absolutely, and I must thank you for making our time for this conversation.
Thank you very much, Leah, and well done to you and the work that you do. I admire your work greatly, and keep going.
Thank you.
Our education segment Simplified is next. From there we head to the markets. We birth here, but don't forget you can catch up with markets and more on our sister website. It is www.marketnigeriatv.com. We have all the details there for you. Until we come your way again same time next week, remain with us at Saban Media Services. That is the channel on YouTube. Leave your comments, questions, and suggestions to help us serve you better. My name is Leah. Have a beautiful weekend, and God bless Nigeria.